Before the bombs dropped, there were 50 states, 50 unique cultures, landscapes, and power structures. But in Fallout's twisted post-apocalyptic nuclear timeline, these borders didn't vanish. They mutated, so to say. Some became military dictatorships, others graveyards, and others forgotten civilizations. In this video, we're traveling across the wasteland ruins of the reimagined America, one state at a time. From the overrun wastelands from Florida to the war machines of California, we'll uncover the fate of all 50 states within the Fallout universe. This is the dark and fractured legacy of the United States after the end of the world. So if this interests you, jump into your refurbished Chrysler Highwayman and get ready to hit the road as I take you on a journey across the wastelands of America. Before jumping into the topic of all the states and everything we know about them, let's first talk about the United States as a whole. Throughout the 21st century, America served as one of the world's most dominant superpowers, rivaled only by that of China, and the nation developed advanced technologies mostly centered around nuclear fusion and nuclear fission, from orbital research stations to advanced consumer robotics. By 2077, the U.S. was heavily controlled by a deep state known as the Enclave, with heavy ties to the military-industrial complex. The once thriving democracy was now become effectively a military dictatorship ruled by the corporate interests and military leaders. The interference by the Enclave caused the nation's continuity of government protocols and inevitably resulted in the widespread breakdown of the chain of command during the Great War, leading to the total collapse and ultimately the collapse of the dilution of the United States. Between the resource wars, the space wars, and the government itself, I really want to dive into more of the history of the U.S. in a series, so stay tuned if this is something you're really interested in, because I want to go into the breakdown as to why the Great War actually happened in the Fallout universe. But this is a whole different topic that I really want to get into, but mainly that the Enclave was behind a lot of this, well, the starts of the Enclave causing this kind of resource collapse and societal government breakdown. So now that we have that kind of breakdown before, we also know that the once group United States and the strong federal government also begin to break down, again, seen through a lot of influenced by the Enclave. This is why we get the 13 Commonwealths that we see in the Fallout series. So I'll be going into depth about which state belongs to which Commonwealth and what we know about it. Keep in mind, this information is based off of the Fallout Bible, so it's not necessarily canon, but it is indeed it is not said otherwise, and we know that the states are broken down into commonwealths based in the canon games. So it's canon, and because it's not stated otherwise, if that makes any sense. So without further ado, let's jump into the first state. Alaska. Originally part of the Northwest Commonwealth, we actually know a decent amount about Alaska via the Fallout 3 DLC Operation Anchorage. Although we know about the state is only from a small time period before the war, and what we do know is actually not considered accurate to the real timeline and is meant more as a battle simulation. This does give us a rough idea about what happened during the liberation of Anchorage. The Anchorage campaign occurred between June of 2076 and ended in January of 2077 when the Chinese forces were completely drawn out of the state. This war was also when the T-51B power armor was first introduced, marking it the first time power armor was used in a war in the world. In fact, this invasion by Communist China is the reason why the Fallout universe turned into what it is, as noted in a terminal in Rivet City in Fallout 3. In quote, although it's uncertain when the declaration of war on China was made, some say 2066 when they invaded Alaska, others say 2067 when the first power armor suits were deployed to counter their forces. It, being the declaration of war on paper, is the last known document of note authored by the United States government. This declaration of war would eventually lead to the entire world being bombed, and so on and so forth. That's not the only major thing that happened during this rather short war. In fact, this was also the reason for the construction of Liberty Prime, Psycho, and so much more, but we are going to go into a lot about these topics. We need to talk about the person in charge of this whole operation, General Constantine Chase. General Constantine would later have a fort named after him and had the highest ranking general officer rank and was one of the most predominant pre-war military officers as the commander of the Battle of Anchorage and responsible for driving away the People's Liberation Army from Alaska. He was a competent officer, noted for his gruff personality and starch anti-communism bordering on paranoia. Instead of relying on conventional military assets, Chase launched a development program to create a super weapon capable of liberating Anchorage, Alaska in the form of a walking, talking, nuke-tossing hero who would remind the world of what it means to be a superpower and chuck the Chinese into submission like a nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Confident that Robco and General Atomics would succeed in the project, Chase announced the development of the super weapon during a press conference at the Pentagon in June of 2072. This premature announcement turned into an embarrassment down the road, as while the contracted companies completed Liberty Prime, the development team under the Stanley Bloomfield failed to find the power system compact enough to power it reliably. Thus, Liberty Prime was actually never finished in the war, and Chase was forced to rely on the regular forces in the final stages of the reclamation of Alaska, bolstered by the combat robots and newly deployed winterized T-51B power armor units. Chase authorized the deployment of Psycho during the operation, an experimental combat drug developed by his private research company, bolstering combat performance at a risk of causing early on-stage dementia and psychotic aggression. Without a doubt, this invasion in Alaska would be felt throughout the United States, as many terminals featured in other games showcase that civilians in the continental United States were feeling the high tensions from the war, with low morale during the June to January crisis, with many people expecting the worst and not sure how the war would go. Not sure how the war would go, as the war was being fought from Anchorage, Alaska to Shantou, China. Now, what about vaults? Due to the map in the Vault-Tec meeting area only being that of the continental United States, we actually don't know if Alaska has any vaults within the state, and the same can be said about Hawaii. However, with the war just finishing months before the bombs fell and the limited civilians in Alaska and the issues with shipping materials and construction, I honestly highly doubt there are many vaults in Alaska, and I would dare say that there might be one max within the region, and then again, that is based off other states having vaults similar populations. Arizona. Originally in the Four Corners Commonwealth, Arizona appears within the Fallout New Vegas very kinda. It's in the eastern side of the Hoover Dam and occurs in Arizona. So basically this very small portion of the map is Arizona. And you really only see it during the Battle of the Hoover Dam, so the very end of the game, and is actually where the Legion is stationed on that side of the Colorado River, I believe it is, without looking it up. For many years after the Great War, Arizona was a hive of lawlessness and unchecked violence, described as being so heavily infested with raiders that trade between fortified settlements was virtually impossible. Many tribes in the area, some no different from petty gangs, also took up raiding, freely entering the few organized towns such as Tucson, formerly the city of Tucson, robbing or killing people as they pleased. Arizona's fate, along with much of the Southwest, changed drastically around 2248 with the rise of the army known as the Caesar's Legion, founded as a coalition of tribes residing in the Grand Canyon. By 2281, Caesar himself claims that his legion was in complete control of Arizona, a notion shared by many other wastelanders found in Fallout Vegas. Their strict policy of frontier justice leads to the Legion patrols directly staging attacks against any and all groups of bandits and raiders, orchestrating a complete reversal of the Antarctic-type state of its early post-war years. Many caravan traders, even ones under the NCR banner, attest to trade routes through Arizona and New Mexico, being able to operate largely risk-free compared to other surrounding areas like Utah, where the Legion's presence is still weak. Legate Lanius' original tribe, the Hydebarks, are also said to be from the state, although, anything we know about him is kind of met with a grain of salt, And, because we don't necessarily know if it's, again, this goes into a theory that I covered in a different video about the idea that, like, Atlanteus might actually not be a person, but more like a figure, like kind of like Captain America. But back to characters from Arizona, Raul actually lived in Phoenix for some time. There are also 2 vaults here, one north of Phoenix and one in the Grand Canyon. California. California is where the game started in the original 2 games of the series, and with that, we not only know a decent amount of lore, what has happened over the years within the state, but due to Fallout New Vegas and the Prime TV show, we actually get a decent update about basically everything that has happened in California up to the current timeline. California is the only state that is actually split into 2 different commonwealths, one in the Northwest Commonwealth and the other half in the Southwest Commonwealth, split between North and South. California is also the birthplace of most major factions within the Fallout universe, such as the NCR starting in Shady Sands, the Enclave, which was originally came off of an offshore oil rig off the coast. We have the Unity, aka the Masters Forces, the original antagonists of the original Fallout game. We have the Khans, the Crimson Caravan, the Followers of the Apocalypse, and so much more. During the Great War, much of the coastline was just devastated, particularly around the San Diego and Los Angeles. Massive craters were created as a result of the bombardment, the largest one situated where the Orange County used to be located. However, not all was lost. Many took refuge in one of the 11 vaults found within the state, 7 of which are actually seen in universe. And we have actually seen other companies like West Tech and the Sierra Army Depot and the Mariposa military base actually went underground, creating their own versions of vaults and allowing organizations to stay going even after the bombs fell. However, not everyone was so lucky. The first group of the emerged and found a new town were the ghoulified inhabitants of Vault 12 beneath Bakersfield. Necropolis was founded in the summer of 2083. Less than a year later, in 2084, Set wrestled control of the settlement from the original overseer. The founding of Necropolis started a decade of development within the region. In 2091, after receiving the all-clear sign, Vault 8 opened the doors and Vault City was founded. A year later, the demonstration vault in the ruins of Los Angeles opened, and the inhabitants founded Atium, which later became known as Boneyard. 2 years later, in 2093, the future mercantile superpower was established around a filthy oasis in the desert. The founder of the first mayor of the settlement, called Angus, called it the Hub. A central location soon attracted plenty of traders. One of the landmark decisions would be to shape the wasteland for decades as the hub's adoption of the bottle cap currency. Within 10 years, the city's founding in 2093, caps became the standard currency within the wasteland and would only rival later on to the NCR dollar. That would be seen later on in the region when the NCR took over, but caps basically took over the U.S. region, and that became the standard currency from then on. The Vault Dweller would then soon leave Vault 13 and destroy the Master with the help of Shady Sands and the Brotherhood of Steel. Eventually, many of these cities in the area would join up with Shady Sands and would band together to form the New California Republic, or NCR, covering most of California all the way to the Hoover Dam, where most likely they lost the second battle over the dam. After spreading itself too thin and expensive endless battles with the Legion, the once great NCR fell in 2296 with the destruction of Shady Sands. This led to the return of the wasteland economy in the Boneyard region, with bottle caps previously abandoned, returned to being the only currency guaranteed to be universally accepted in trade. With the NCR dollars becoming all but worthless, independent settlements like Philly began to grow as local trade hubs for the wasteland travelers, farmers, and small merchants offering various goods and services. It is currently unknown the status of the other cities, independent or part of the NCR. We don't know what happened to all these other areas and if they joined or what happened after the fall of Shady Sands. It is assumed that they were also hit with a decline, as the NCR was their backbone of their economy and their protection and security and all this stuff. So I assumed it probably wasn't as bad as Shady Sands because they didn't get bond, but they already had some leaders in place and they had guards, so it's most likely they just had to redo trades and agreements and whatnot. But yeah, that is the long and beautiful story of California. Colorado. Colorado is shown in Fallout Tactics, but talked about a bunch in Fallout New Vegas. We know that at least as of Fallout New Vegas, that the Legion has expanded into much of Colorado. Let's talk about the most interesting city in Colorado, both in our timeline and in Fallout's timeline, and that is, of course, Denver. We know it was a test bed for the usage of cyber dogs as law enforcement, and we can actually see that in Rex, who is the best boy in Fallout New Vegas, served actually in Denver. Said to have also been overrun by feral dogs following the nuclear apocalypse. The only known human inhabitants were the Hangdogs, a tribe who inhabited the outskirts of the city and learned how to actually live with the dogs of Denver, treating them as kind of spirit animals and companions in the post-war wasteland. Between 2277 and 2281, Caesar's Legion came to the city during their conquest of the tribes of the former American Southwest, led by Legate Lanius. The Hangdogs initially put up resistance, even managing to last longer than most of the other tribes before them. However, the Legate put an end to their resistance after having the legionaries capture and burn the tribe's dogs alive on pyres and crippling the morale of this group, as they feared their dog spirits were doomed to burn forever in the afterlife if they were killed this way. Soon after, the Hangdogs surrendered and were assimilated, and their culture wiped out a part of their skill in training dogs. They were actually made later on into the Legion Houndmasters, so they were brought back into the Legion, just like every other tribe before them. Despite ultimately succeeding, the cost of the takeover of Denver was steep. However, Lanius lost many men to a combination of factors, including supply lines stretched thin, the vicious dogs that killed many people, the complete lack of human population to which to draw new recruits from to restore the army's numbers. Even with the Legion's grip on it, the city still remains dominated by feral dog packs today, which many include pre-war police cyber dogs, which is just the coolest thing to think about, and I, for one, would love to see this as a Fallout location. Like, that just sounds so fun, and I don't understand why there's not a mod currently being or out there that's in like Fallout Denver, because that just sounds such a great location. Other locations in the state include Vault Zero within the Cheyenne Mountains, also known as the Calculator's Lair, where the residents would have their brains extracted and preserved in tanks during their time there. There are a total of 3 vaults within the state, one by Denver, one by the Utah border, and one by Colorado Springs, close to where Vault Zero was. So there's actually a high chance and reason that Vault Zero is indeed canon. Now, let's talk pre-war. The United States government may have maintained a continuity of government installations within the state, with Galaxy News Network reporter making an offhand remark about a mountain in Colorado for which the president and other officials to go under and direct the events of the world. And that's just like the theory of the Denver airport, like having this mass vault system basically for officials to go live under, which I love that theory. Colorado was also set to appear in Fallout Van Buren, playing a actual significant role in the backstory of the game. Before the war, Denver was a major industrial center supporting the nearby major scientific center in Boulder. However, it suffered from a poison gas cloud over the city originating from the nearby Rocky Mountain Arsenal. When the Sino-American War began, food rationing was imposed upon the region. In addition, unemployment crisis hit due to a lack of resources. The situation came to a head when food imports from Mexico and the Great Midwest Commonwealth stopped, and the food riots actually consumed the city. The National Guard was actually called to brutally quell the unrest in the area, and an outbreak of the new plague just worsened the situation, with rioters setting a large portion of the city on fire. By the time the bombs actually fell, according to this Fallout Van Buren timeline, Denver was already in complete chaos, and the city of Colorado Springs was also a site of major breakout of the new plague, and numerous robot production factories were just destroyed around the city. Colorado was home to a variety of factions as well. We have the Hangdog tribe, controlled by the outskirts of Denver, venerating the dogs that infested the ruins. We have the Twin Mothers tribe, under the rule of the goddess Diana Stone. The Ciphers, who were descendants of pre-war scientists who tried to save records of important technology and became a largely nomadic tribe based in the Mesa Verde region. We have the Iron Lines tribe, who is based out of the Circle Junction and controlled large stretches of railroad. In addition to these tribes, a faction of scientists also operated out of the Boulder Dome region. The Brotherhood of Steel would claim an abandoned bunker in the southern Colorado region and would become known as the Maxson Bunker. Foreshadowing the planned Fallout 4, as in the Fallout 3 that would come after Fallout Van Buren. So, if Interplay kept Fallout, this is what would happen in Fallout 4, which is just weird to think about. In this version, Caesar's Legion was to encounter Denver, traveling east to the direction of Kansas, where their new headquarters is located. The Legion appears there once a year. Every few weeks, a pair of scouts are sent east if the radioactive dust storms have been subsided for the season. Anton, the leader of the NCR Salvagers in Denver, is from the Midwest and fled to Denver to escape Caesar's Legion. So keep this in mind, that this whole last section I've talked about Denver and Colorado, up to when I mentioned that we were talking about Fall of Van Buren. This is all not canon. This is all from a canceled Fallout 3 game, canceled Fallout 4 game. This is just all the ideas that were originally set for Colorado. And I have to say, man, if only Interplay kept the Fallout franchise, because it has just so many cool ideas of what to expect. But yeah, that is the long and cool story of Colorado. Hey there, so I'm not exactly big enough to be sponsored or anything, but, these videos do take a decent amount of time, and I am a Bethesda ambassador, meaning that if you want to buy anything official, like Elder Scrolls or Fallout merch, and you want to get it official, from the Bethesda directly gear store, use my code and my links, and not only will you receive 20% off your order, but I will also get a little bit of a commission, so it's a little bit of a win-win situation. This is one of the few locations where you can actually get official Bethesda gear merch, like I said, and it's really top-tier content and quality, and I really love it. So go ahead, check out the Bethesda gear store, link down in the comment section down below, / in the description. Use the code that I have that's pinned down in the comments. If that code does not work, please just leave a comment and I will happily send you a new one. Thanks again for everything, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Connecticut. Set, of course, in the New England Commonwealth, Connecticut surprisingly has 2 vaults that are supposedly in the state. But other than that, we have very little information that can be found in the game. We do get a few mentions of the state in Fallout 76 by terminal entries or nodes found throughout the wasteland, but nothing really of value, just mentions of some people being from there or traveling from one city to state to another, or, nothing really notable. Characters that if I say you like them, you won't know. Do you know who Lance Ames is? Yeah? No, you don't. Yeah, I bet you don't. I bet not a single person in the comments can tell me who this is without looking it up. So unfortunately, it's just random people and throwaway characters. So that's what it is. Florida. Florida is another state I expected so much more from. Being originally from the Gulf Commonwealth before the bombs fell, Florida actually only has 2 vaults located within inside of it, one in Tallahassee and one in Orlando. And the only other mention we have of Florida is a joke from the Blue Ridge Caravan Company bartender in Fallout 76 that says the Brotherhood 1st Expeditionary Force is just a traveling theater troupe pretending to be soldiers, and one of his regular claims to have, of this idea is that Paladin Romani was a former trapeze act in Florida, and that's all we have. It's honestly pretty good. I'm pretty content also with not seeing Florida in the Fallout universe, because can you just imagine the horrible creatures coming out of the irradiated water and the swamps and the marshlands of Florida? Just imagine raiders also from Florida. Just looking at Florida residents now, some of them could be raiders right now, and it's honestly for the best that we don't see a Fallout Florida. Georgia. Originally part of the Southeast Commonwealth, Georgia has 3 vaults within it, 1 by Savannah and 2 by Atlanta. And the only other thing we know about Georgia is that Matt Murtagh, who was a pitcher for the Swatting Sultans, who was the baseball team out of Boston, which I still think is hilarious that this is the name instead of the Boston Red Sox, but Hawaii. Hawaii is actually mentioned in Fallout 3, 4, and 76. However, none of them have anything of value for this video purposes. We do know that just like in our timeline, Hawaii was annexed in the 19th century and finally became a state just around our timeline. So we know that Hawaii played a huge part in getting America to join World War II due to Pearl Harbor. But other than that, the only thing we get is we know one character named Mark who was alive before the bombs went off and went to, the Beaver Creek lanes in Far Harbor / Bar Harbor, Maine. And he was in the Navy stationed in Hawaii for some time. That's about one of the big mentions we have of Hawaii. However, it would be in Fallout 76, this entry gets a little bit more interesting with information that comes from a note in Sutton that has a list of airplane parts with a note that reads, Hawaii or bust. So obviously we know this person was trying their best to make it to Hawaii. It is presumed this note is post-war. So it brings the question, are there rumors that saying Hawaii is safe, or is it just people presuming that Hawaii wasn't as hit as like mainland US? Again, due to the vault map we see in the season 1 of the show, it only shows the continental U.S., so we don't see Alaska or Hawaii. So unfortunately, we don't know necessarily if there are vaults in Hawaii, but I presume there most likely is. Idaho. Set in the Northwest Commonwealth, Idaho actually has 3 vaults within the state, and I have to say I am shocked that there are so many vaults in Idaho. There is one in Boise, one in Idaho Falls, and one on the northwest border of Washington. The only thing we know about Idaho is that after the Second Battle of the Hoover Dam, if the Great Khans are still allied with the Legion, when the NCR wins, the remnants of the tribe are driven north to the wilderness of Idaho. So let's break this down. So if you get this, you only get this ending if the NCR wins, and you basically don't do anything with the Khans, and the Khans just are naturally formed with the Legion. So looking at this, although we do know from the first season of the Fallout TV show, and the second season of the trailer from season 2, the NCR ending is most likely not canon whatsoever, and the Legion ending is also not likely canon. So with that, we kind of see that it's either the House or Independent ending that is canon, and because you get this ending, if you literally do nothing and the Legion loses, and the Khans are just automatically with the Legion, this ending of the Khans being sent to Idaho is very possible with this timeline, especially with the idea that you basically don't do anything and the NCR sends them to Idaho. But again, that's all relevant if it's a House ending or an Independent New Vegas ending, in which I could definitely see the Khans are basically, I presume, removed from the Vegas region. So whether or not they go to Idaho, or there's another state I mentioned later on in this, into the other territory, but essentially that the Khans are removed and might possibly be in the Idaho region. Now, let's look at the wilderness part of the Idaho position we have. It sounds more hopeful instead of wasteland or desert or something like that. So it makes me think that Idaho wasn't as touched as many of the other states, similar to that of like West Virginia and Kentucky and like that central region. And it makes sense. I mean, let's be honest, name other big states in Idaho and why it would be bombed as much. So it's most likely that there isn't as much, and like the idea that Idaho is relatively free of radiation and stuff like that. It's very possible, and it could be like a very place where a bunch of cities and not cities, but like towns and whatnot are still coming back to it. So it's really interesting. It's very possible the wilds, because it's wild. It could mean it was taken back by nature. So Idaho is also just a mutated forest type region. Again, we don't necessarily know, but that's what I'm gathering from the word wilds. Illinois. Illinois is one of the main locations of the semi-canon Fallout Tactics game, and thus all of the information we get in this entry might be considered canon, although we don't really know. We do know that at once this was a part of the Midwest Commonwealth, and at some point the Brotherhood of Steel dispatched a fleet of Zeppelins to hunt down supermutants in the Midwest, most of which were destroyed. One of these airships crash-landed in the ruins of Chicago and established a new chapter in the area known as the Brotherhood of Steel. For reasons unknown, this chapter eventually went rogue and severed contact with the rest of the Brotherhood and is now in reference, called the Midwest Brotherhood, aka the chapter seen in Fallout Tactics. So at the very least, this chapter is indeed canon, and I, for one, think the basic idea of the chapter and the antagonist of the main storyline of Fallout Tactics is considered canon. It just might be the smaller things that aren't necessarily, canon, like Harry Deathclaws, for example. Inside the state, under its chapter's control, was the Bunker Alpha and the Bunker Beta that was under control of the Midwest Brotherhood of Steel. Now, the following villages/cities are also within the state that appeared in Fallout Tactics, and that is Springfield, Rock Falls, Quincy, Peoria, Macomb, Freeport, and Brommenwood. Brommenwood and Macomb are small tribal villages who have raider problems. Freeport then was, before the Great War, a city in the state of Illinois, and by 2197 the town became a large raider den, housing limited supplies of fossil fuels and a large alcohol distillery. Springfield is a small town with ghouls and humans, with the mayor actually being Chris Avellone, who, if you don't know who Chris Avellone is, he's the director of Obsidian Entertainment, who made Fallout New Vegas. Now, as for characters from this region, we have Edie, who was originally maintained in the Enclave Outpost in Chicago sometime before or around 2277, and Whitley, a scientist, recorded and stored a message in the iBots or Edie's databank before sending him on a cross-country journey to the Enclave installment in Navarro, in which he requested any staff one of the Chicago outposts to give the unit any repairs as needed. A little outside Chicago, a boy named Tommy helped repair Edie using some pre-war license plate from Illinois. Nick Valentine is also from Illinois, or at least the real-life version was from there. Before the synth transfer, the actual real-life personality of Nick Valentine. He was actually a police officer in Chicago before he transferred to Boston to help with the Eddie Winter case. And Sophie Daguerre, a astronaut who can be a camp companion in Fallout 76, was actually originally from Chicago pre-war. And as for vaults, there are 4 of them within the state, 2 of which are actually in Chicago. Iowa. Originally in the Plains Commonwealth, the only thing we know about the state is that Dr. Constance Nicholas from the National Isolated Radio Array pre-war in Fallout 76 is originally from this state. Again, he is a character you do not meet in the game, you just read about it a little bit in, so you most likely do not recognize this name, nor do you know who this person is. Also with that, we know that there are 2 vaults supposedly located within the state, one near Des Moines and the other one on the border of Nebraska, close to Omaha. Kansas. Just like every other state within the Fallout Tactics game, take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. Originally part of the Plains Commonwealth, the only thing we know about the state for sure that is canon, that is stated that there are 2 vaults within the state, and both are close to Kansas City. And other than that, the world's biggest ball of yarn of twine, and other than that, the world's biggest ball of twine is supposedly within the state, as said by Guile Sweetwater. It is also assumed that the Great Radiated Dust Bowl is also part of the state/region, as stated in Fallout 2. Now, for the most interesting part that a lot of people don't know about, the Brotherhood of Steel Midwest chapter has 2 bunker stations within the state, Bunker Delta and Bunker Epsilon, each of which is currently recruiting members to join the Brotherhood of Steel. And this is no matter your background, they do not care. You can be a ghoul, a super mutant, no matter what, they do not care. You can join them, which is, of course, very different compared to other chapters of the Brotherhood of Steel. As for cities and towns that are found in this state, we have the cities and towns of the following. We have Coldwater, Newton, Junction City, and the Great Bend. Coldwater is a town built amongst the ruins of the pre-war city of Coldwater, Kansas. Coldwater is mainly famous in the region for its casinos. At the time of tactics, a group of raiders known as the Red Stingers had taken over the area, and the warrior, or the main character of the game, has to go kill and clear the area. Newton, or Junktown, was the main camp of the Rivermont movement, a technology-worshipping cult, which is kind of funny because what are the odds that two groups that really love technology that are kind of cult-like are within the same area at the same time? And then you have Junction City, who are at odds with the Reavers / Newton, and actually have managed to hold off well against the Calculator's humanoid robots, aka the main antagonist of the game. It's a mid-sized town that is independent. And then we have the Great Bend, which is another small town featured in Fallout Tactics, until the Calculator's force basically killed almost everyone in the town, just leaving a handful of people left and leaving the town basically abandoned. Kentucky. Located in the East Central Commonwealth, what we know about this state is that there are at least one living commune that seems peaceful enough to allow Sophie Wagner a peaceful and good childhood by the time of Fallout 76. Funny enough, two other NPCs are from Kentucky, that of Carver Timmerman, a trader and a client of the Blue Ridge Caravan Company in Fallout 76, and John Henry Eden says he's from Kentucky, although he is a computer, and this is probably just his personality or programming or just a lie, really, but it is interesting. We know that the Independent Arms Group, a weapons manufacturer, is headquartered in Liberty, Kentucky, who made suppressors for assault rifles. And other than that, what we know about this state is just based on the commune stories told by Sophie and the fact that it's close by West Virginia. It is assumed that it had a similar fate to the landscape of Fallout 76 in West Virginia. So without a doubt, it has a slightly similar landscape, and again, most of the state probably being untouched against larger cities. As for vaults, there is supposedly one vault within the state, and that is right below Louisville. Louisiana. Louisiana is located on the Gulf Commonwealth and is home to two vaults, one near Baton Rouge and the other one by New Orleans. The only other thing we know about this state is Initiate Ellison, who was found in the Fallout 76 Pit Expedition, is from Louisiana originally and then moved to West Virginia at a very young age. And if this is the case, it most likely means that Louisiana is worse off than West Virginia after the war, and with so much like a family with young children, wanting to go up north or going to a different area and moving that far away just makes me think that it has to be worse off in there, or West Virginia is just in that of a better spot, especially in the early days after the war. And honestly, I just also think about the mutations that might be down in Louisiana, like of alligators and other wild creatures that might be out there, so it's probably for the best. Maine. Originally part of the New England Commonwealth, we only know Maine based off of what we were shown in the Fallout 4 DLC, Far Harbor, and thus really only know the island of Bar Harbor / Far Harbor and the smaller islands off the coast of it. And we don't know much else about the mainland state. However, we do know that the last known governor of the state before the bombs fell was female, and this can be seen on the Vim factory terminals. Vim was also a very popular drink in this state, and more popular than Nuka-Cola. This is, of course, a nod to Moxie and the other local sodas to the region compared to soda titans like Pepsi or Coke. Vim, of course, tried to break out of the state and become more well-known nationally, but that just didn't work well due to the power and lawyers behind Nuka-Cola. Vim had multiple different flavors. One of the most interesting was trying to create a soda that tasted like Maine in a bottle. We know the following also about the state, that during the Great War, or directly after it, the shores of Maine were just hit hard by nuclear fallout due to the nuclear detonations that destroyed America. One notable phenomenon, which became known as the fog by the inhabitants of the Mount Desert Island, aka Far Harbor, said that this fog has been around on this island, in quote, forever, and it manifests as the radioactive mass cloud material that plagues Mount Desert Island and its surroundings. Though whether it also affects the mainland is unclear. What we know is that the severity adds to the flow over time. sometimes pulling back from large parts of the island, and other times encroaching right up to the very boundary between the land and sea. The end result was that the areas that the fog's harmful effects and unpredictable presence has rendered almost completely uninhabitable to humans. Those who do chose to live out there in the fog become known as harbormen of Fallout and have developed superstitions, believe that the fog is a force of nature to be respected and feared. Other than the settlement of Far Harbor, we of course have the Children of Adam that have been taking up residence in an old nuclear submarine. We also have the Synth Sanctuary that is in the ruins of Arcadia Observatory, and although depending on how the Fallout show goes, which could canonize a Brotherhood of Steel ending, and thus would make the synths of the Arcadia area basically all killed. Maryland. Based in the Columbia Commonwealth, Maryland takes up a little over a third of the Fallout 3 map, in which the main locations/places of interest include Paradise Falls, Arfu, the Temple of the Union, and Vault 108, which is just a wide and diverse group of things going on within the state. We also see the area known as Point Lookout, which is of course part of this state, with the creepy plague-ridden land that just makes everyone's skin crawl. As for vaults, there are of course one labeled as being there within the map in the Prime show, but we have seen 2 vaults appear within this state, so again, just another issue with that. Massachusetts. Massachusetts once belonged to the New England Commonwealth. Massachusetts is of course home to Boston and the main setting of Fallout 4. Although we don't get the entire map of the state compared to Fallout 76, we do get a decent chunk of the map that could tell us mostly of what happened to the state from there. We know that Massachusetts was hit directly by a nuclear blast just southwest of Boston in an area known as the Glowing Sea in game. This area devastated most of the state. Over the years, the community of Diamond City formed in the ruins of Boston and became known as the Great Green Jewel of the Commonwealth. Other large settlements have come and gone, like Salem and Quincy, both at one point having a large population of settlers. The faction known as the Minutemen was huge at the beginning when the bombs fell, coming in help and protect the people in the Commonwealth within a minute's notice, and it went well until the decline of the faction after poor leadership for years, and finally only a few members remain until the sole survivor helped rebuild the Minutemen and defeated the Institute. With Season 2 of the Fallout TV show coming out later this year, it is with this that we'll most likely find the canon ending of Fallout 4, and that is if we see some of the East Coast chapter from the Brotherhood of Steel, aka the Boston-based Brotherhood of Steel chapter, coming to the West Coast, then we will know indeed that it was either a Brotherhood of Steel ending in Massachusetts, or it was the combined option where the Minutemen, the Railroad, and the Brotherhood of Steel basically just took down the Institute, and none of the other factions were really destroyed or anything, which is the most likely ending that we'll see within the canon of the games. Either way, at the point we are in the main timeline of the Fallout franchise, the Brotherhood of Steel and the Minutemen will be the main faction leaders within the region. We know that west of Boston, Nuka-Cola built the Nuka World theme park, and then speaking of Nuka-Cola, it is also said that John Caleb Bradperton, the owner of the company, was so rich and influential that he owned half the state of Massachusetts itself. Interestingly, the vault map shows 3 dots within this state, but there are a total of 6 vaults found in game. So again, it brings up the question of whether or not clusters and dots, and if they mean anything, or if this map actually means anything at all. Minnesota. Located in the Midwest Commonwealth, Minnesota has 2 known vaults, one by St. Paul and one on the coast of Lake Superior. And other than this, the only other information we have about this state is of the fictional character known as Minnesota Fats, who is a fictional pool hustler created by Walter Tevis, who is actually in this world and is real. So is this even really something to make of note for Minnesota? I don't really know, but technically it is from this, and it is a novelization from Minnesota, so we'll call it from there. Mississippi. Located in the Gulf Commonwealth, Mississippi only has one mention in the entire Fallout franchise, and that can be found in Fallout 4 in General Brock's terminal in Fort Strong. Basically just mentioning that pre-war, General Brock was talking about the development of the M42's mini-nuke modifications that finally finished with tests and was ready to go down and sent some down to the supply yard in Mississippi, and that's all we know. Basically, Mississippi has a bunch of the M42 versions of the mini-nuke launchers. We also have a few mentions of the Mississippi River a few times in Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. But again, this is just a river that runs alongside Mississippi and actually borders a bunch of other states. So it's so large, and so many other states border it. It's not really relevant to talk about this current area. We also know that the state also has one vault, and it is a bit north of Jackson, closer to Canton. We also get another note about Mississippi in Fallout 3 with the Mississippi Quantum Pie recipe given by Sierra Petrovi for completing the Nuka-Cola challenge. This pie is just basically a reference to the regular Mississippi mud pie recipe, and man, I have to say, they do look tasty. Missouri. Missouri is another state with a few cities featured within the Fallout Tactics game, with villages and towns of Jefferson, Martin, St. Louis, and Kansas City. In Jefferson, it was actually had a lab that was taken over by supermutants, who some of them were actually scientists who were trying to find a cure for the sterilization issue with supermutants. Although I'm not exactly sure how canon this is and how canon it would be due to, Fallout Tactics being in that in-between stage. Martin was home to a group of people known as the Beast Lords, who had power to control animals via telepathic powers because of the exposure to radiation. St. Louis was a large city pre-war, largely destroyed, but would eventually be taken over by supermutants. Kansas City was a major nuclear launch site. Although the city was hit by bombs, the Silo staff actually survived and were turned into ghouls and formed a town in the center of the ruined city itself called Gravestone. Before 2197, the ghouls formed a peaceful community and a cult, worshipping the only nuclear bomb left intact in the silo, which they called Petonius. Also, as of note, Missouri was home to several bases for the Unity Remnants group, led by Gurman, that fled east, which is, of course, the master from the original Fallout game. Before the Great War, Cooper Howard, Charles Whiteknife, and Johnny Morton were co-stars in a Western film in which Johnny played a rancher who owned half of Missouri. The state is also home to 2 vaults. Montana. Montana was once a part of the Northern Commonwealth, and we know for a fact that there was another Brotherhood of Steel chapter in here, led by the Elder known as Elder Procolius, at least at the time of Fallout 3, as heard by an untriggerable dialogue from Owen Lyons. It can be assumed that either Lyons got along with this other Elder, or they shared ideals, as he talks about him fondly and reflects on the words of what he once said. We also know that the Lonesome Drifter from Fallout New Vegas is also from the state/area, and that the courier could have possibly have gotten a woman pregnant within the state as well. We know that between it being admitted to the United States in 2077, Montana's biggest export was coal, mined from the subterranean mining operations dotting the state. The towns that formed of these mines persisted even after the Great War, serving to draw in wastelanders looking for a decent living, even if it meant carrying out cruel, laboring work that often led to shorter lifespans from overwork, stress, and unhealthy condition. The state is also home to 2 vaults within inside of it. Nebraska. Located in the Plains Commonwealth, Nebraska has 2 vaults within the state, one near Lincoln and the other one on the border of Wyoming, not near any major city. Now, the only mention of the state comes from the universe is from the Fallout TV show, and that is that we know the Vault 33 crop fields that are shown on the projector that, play around in the main atrium of the vault is actually from a countryside from this state of Nebraska. And that is pretty much it. I know this is really disappointing and pretty much barely worth the mention, but hey, this is the only mention we have of this state. Nevada. Nevada is, of course, the main location of Fallout New Vegas, meaning everything that happened in the main story of the game happened in this state, with major factions being the NCR, the Legion, Mr. House, and smaller Brotherhood of Steel chapter, all appearing within the region. The city of New Vegas is not like any other settlement that we see in the Wasteland, and this was due to Mr. House and his technology that basically saved the city from a nuclear strike, and thus it just became a major trade hub and gambling center in the Wasteland. Other settlements that are in the state is the town of Good Springs, Novak, we have the location of the Boomers, and Jacobstown. The Legion and the NCR also have a huge presence within the area, again, fighting twice over the control of the Hoover Dam, known, of course, as the Battle of the Hoover Dam. However, this state will be updated even more when Season 2 of the Fallout show launches, in which will bring the return of the area further down in the timeline from the game of Fallout New Vegas. As of note, it's most likely the case that the NCR and Legion victory are not canon, and in fact both factions are hurting pretty bad after the war and just pulling away from the region. The only time will tell really for what this state will have, especially coming this December. This is another state that has more vaults that appear in game than that are the dots within the state. So with that, we have seen on the map that 5 vaults appear within the state. However, actually playing in the game, we have seen that there are actually 8 vaults within the area. So again, going back to my cluster theory of like, you know, if we want to come to the idea that these are canon and these are stable that are within it, then, you know, it's just a cluster kind of thing. But that still doesn't make necessarily sense. So I don't really know. This whole vault map thing kind of throws a damper into some things when you start poking holes at it like this way. New Hampshire. Located within the New England Commonwealth, New Hampshire has the least amount of things known about it and has a state with no vaults, and the only thing we actually know about it comes from Fallout 4, and with it is the NH&M company, who specializes in transportation of freight, and the only thing we really know is from this company is it's just based out of the state, you know, by the name alone of NH&M, which stands for New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So it is most likely that this company is either based out of New Hampshire or Massachusetts, or like it's on the border of these states put together. But yeah, that's pretty much all we know about it, is that it most likely had the a company known as MH&M who was out of it. New Jersey. Appearing in Fallout 76 Atlantic City Expedition, all the information we have of the state comes from this expedition, so the current state of the city and the state at the point of where we are in the timeline might differ. Located within the Eastern Commonwealth, the nuclear holocaust had a profound impact on the state. In Atlantic City specifically, the rampant flooding hit and submerged the entire swaths of the urbanized areas. However, the biggest impact was on the Pine Barrens, where the nuclear fallout twisted the once natural region, leading to the emergence of the overgrowth, a parasitic type of flora capable of infecting living creatures and presenting a persistent threat to the area of New Jersey, covered by or adjacent to the Barrens. However, the most notable and near mythical of the mutants that were in the area, not unlike the Deathclaws in New California, was the Jersey Devil, an apex-type predator that could be encountered in the Barrens of the city itself. Despite the mutations and nuclear devastation, New Jersey was one of the earliest examples of recovery after the Great War. Atlantic City reorganized and eventually led under Mayor Timothy Lane, which just triumphed the other factions, most likely the Munes, the Showmen, and the Lamboni family, ensuring the city retained a fraction of its pre-war luster thanks to the mass water purification systems, the power production, the farms outside the city, and the emergency services, and even the leisure activities that attracted caravans and visitors despite the ever-present threat of the Barrens. Even the Pine Barrens remained inhabited, with their inhabitants being called the Pineys, as before the war. There are said to also be 3 vaults within this state, although none of them appear within the expedition of Atlantic City or within the city of Atlantic City. So with that, it also begs the question as to later on in the timeline, how come we don't see or hear anything about Atlantic City? You would think something that would rival that of New Vegas in the east would make some kind of appearance in that of Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. And again, we can chop it up to, you know, it not being prevalent in the timeline, like it basically just bursts down as no longer a big city with gambling and leisure activities. Or we can just say that, you know, it's because it wasn't thought of, it wasn't conceived, so therefore it didn't exist. New Mexico. Based in the 4 states Commonwealth, New Mexico is large as a state. has been taken under control of the Legion, or at least it did before the events of Fallout New Vegas. However, with the most likely canon ending of the game being the Legion lost at the Battle of the Hoover Dam, they would most likely lose a bit of their foothold within the region, meaning that the state most likely has become more raider focused, small shanty towns kind of thing. We do know that even before the events of Fallout New Vegas, that the Legion did control all of New Mexico, as can be heard by Dale Barton in the game, that he says he likes to trade with businesses in Arizona and New Mexico instead of the NCR, which means that it was completely controlled by the Legion. He would say the Legion instead of New Mexico. Also, does this piece of dialogue note that people refer to old state lines as different regions still? Like, are they not under control of the NCR or Legion? Or are they their old states? You know what I mean? Like, is the NCR, like, is it California or is it the New California Republic? Like where does this line, like, lie? Like, how do people designate the different areas? It's just really interesting to me. Before the Great War in Albuquerque, New Mexico, suffered a series of carjackings committed by Shanghai Sally, who was an alleged Chinese spy on the run from law enforcement, and she would eventually actually provide security in Vault 79 that can be seen in Fallout 76. She would eventually die by authorities with a group of 5 other soldiers who stole $20 million from the vault and went to Vegas. New Mexico was also set to appear in the canceled Fallout 3 game, now known as Fallout Van Buren, as the reservation, previously known as the Los Alamos Nuclear Testing Facility, would be featured in the game and would be in New Mexico. This facility would be used to create nuclear missiles for the bomb satellite, which would be the main location for the game and to be featured in the Enclave in Space portion of the game. New Mexico also has 2 vaults within the state, one on the border with Mexico and one north of Santa Fe. Interestingly, from Fallout Van Buren, Vault 29 was set to appear close to the vault location on the map. So with its mention in Fallout 76 as one having the same experiment, again, go watch my other video if you want more lore about it. It basically confirms that Vault 29 is this state. It is this vault that's on this location that was supposedly in this canceled game. So it is very interesting, but yeah, that is what we know about New Mexico. New York. New York has to be one of my top bucket state/city for a Fallout game to be placed in, as I feel it just could be such a good area. Just imagine just wandering the cities of New York City. Unfortunately, that will most likely never happen. Featured in the Eastern Commonwealth, New York surprisingly only has one vault in it, which is wild to me, and it is by Albany, the state capital. Pre-war, the cities overwhelmingly relied on nuclear power to meet its energy requirements. In 2065, the city's population had reached 17 million people, which is over double the population of the city of New York City right now. And in June of that year, energy demands on the reactors powering the city almost caused it to go critical. The near meltdown resulted in the introduction of power rationing, with the incident becoming known as the Hot Summer. In terms of what we know about the state, we don't know too much, but one thing is apparent, that New York City was bombed hard. In 2 different dialogues, we get mentioned that New York City is worse for wear. In Fallout 76, from the potential companion Aldelia, she says the following: "I'm Adelia. And as you may have guessed from my alluring charm, I am a performer, a showgirl, a shining star shooting across the night sky from Atlantic City to Broadway, or whatever new Broadway is, since the Big Apple is a big crater." We also know for a fact that the state was hit a few more times during the Great War, due to the news reporter in the beginning of Fallout 4 stating the following. I repeat, confirmed reports of nuclear detonation in New York and Pennsylvania. In the switchboard, the location of the original railroad HQ, in the switchboard, the location where the railroad was originally set up, and pre-war U.S. agents were using it as a nuclear monitoring location, we can get more confirmation that New York and Pennsylvania were indeed bombed, and later rumors after the bombs fell confirmed that New York was actually worse off than Boston, as stated by Nathan Broadhurst in Fallout 76. So with all this information, we really know that New York was hit hard. Around the late 2280s, an expedition force of the Brotherhood of Steel passed over numerous cities along the East Coast during the expedition from the Capital Wasteland to the Commonwealth aboard their airship, the Prinwin, with eyewitnesses' accounts telling the direct light of skyscrapers taken over by mutants. Besides all the bombings, the only other thing we really know is that Johnny Weston from Fallout 76 was actually caught breaking into the Federal Reserve Bank of New York pre-war, which would eventually start his love for breaking into things and become a heist man. And thus, after this bank robbery gone wrong, he became a registered felon. Fallout 4 was also discussed in the very early stages to be featured in New York instead of Boston, but this was scrapped due to unknown reasons. So with all this information, I highly doubt we'll ever see a Fallout New York, just because there is indeed only one vault, and they made it clear that New York City has just been bombed so much and that super mutants overrun the city that it's most likely never going to be a true location. North Carolina. Based in the Southeast Commonwealth, again, there's not much we really know about the state, with the only mention we really get of it comes from Fallout 3 with the Wright Flyer, which is of course true in our timeline, so with that it's not a great example to start off with. The only other mention of note we have of the state of North Carolina is that the Lee Rapid Pharmaceuticals Company is located in Charlotte, North Carolina, which, if you've ever played the Operation Anchorage DLC in Fallout 3, you would know is the substitute for Stimpaks, most notably from the form of health dispensers. North Carolina is also home to 2 vaults, which is of course seen in the map in the Fallout TV show. Ohio. Located in the East Central Commonwealth, which I have to say I am a little annoyed by that they aren't in the Midwest Commonwealth, but whatever, I digress. Ohio actually kind of has been seen in Fallout, mainly in the Fallout 76, where, at the Silver Bridge, which, it's right across the Silver Bridge, which is in fact Ohio. And actually in the Pit DLC, we get a bit closer to Ohio as well. I've actually heard rumors that in the new Fallout 76 update coming later this year that they might be stepping into Ohio from the Silver Bridge. What that is yet to be seen for sure, but I heard rumors that that is where it's going to be expanding. Some I might have to update this video later on. Other than that, we also know that there are 2 vaults that are located within the state, one by Columbus and the other one by Cincinnati. One company we know that is in the Fallout universe that is based out of the state is the LS Suckman Company out of Orovilletown, Ohio, which produce vegetable-based shortenings to be used in baked goods, aka the industrial-sized packages of shortening that can be found in the Commonwealth and Appalachia. This company, of course, is a reference to the Smucker Company that makes jams that is based out of Orrville, Ohio. Another note is that Initiate Norland from Fallout 76 actually mentions that he is from Ohio, so he's indeed the first official canon character from this state. Oklahoma. Based in the Plains Commonwealth, this is yet another state in which we know little information about this state. In as early as Fallout 3, we get a mention in a Vault-Tec letter with knowledge that there are indeed a few vaults within the state, and then finally in the end of the first season of the Fallout TV show, we get more proof that there is indeed 2 vaults within the state, one by Tulsa and the other one by Oklahoma City, which makes sense because name another city in the state that is there in Oklahoma. Like, name one other city. Name one other town within Oklahoma. Yep, go ahead. I mean, it makes sense, really. Also, as of note, in the description for the Chrysler's Cherry Bomb car sold at the Bethesda Gear Store, we know that at least before the war, much like the real state in real life, it had golden crop fields, so it gave tons of wheat and corn and basically, it's very much like a state that it is in our current timeline and whatnot. And I have stated this in my Vault video, but I really want to see a game take place in one of the Plain states, just based off the fact that there's in fact a radiation dust bowl that is supposedly within the region. So I just want to see that happening. And it's not necessarily that the radiation dust bowl is happening in Oklahoma, but I presume it is because it's within the Plain States region. Oregon. Based in the Northwest Commonwealth, Oregon actually appears in one Fallout game, and that is mentioned in 2 others, and was planned to be featured in a canceled game. Now, let's get into it. By the late 21st century, Oregon was a host to a Ford depot of the United States Army under General Victor Breckinridge. In September of 2077, the strain of the then going on Sino-American War resulted in the depot's supply being unable to meet the demand, leading to a limited shipments being deployed to the frontline units, such as the General Constantine Chase's Anchorage Command. Following the nuclear apocalypse, survivors found various communities around the former state, including the Coos Bay and Klamath. Over 2 centuries of post-nuclear regrowth in southern parts of the state became a stretch of wildland with a partially rich population of geckos within the coastal region. The species of the geckos exploded also, leading to an economic growth in the area around the trapping and skinning of geckos for organized towns like Klamath and the scattered tribes inhabiting the area. However, the widespread tribal settlements also made the territory a favorite target for the Slavers Guild of New California, who preyed on the isolated populations for a stable business. In general, the relations between the wildland tribes and the fortified settlements were strained, with the latter considering themselves superior due to them having the sense to establish their towns in old but long-lasting ruins rather than out in the untamed wilderness. Many developed a deep prejudice towards these tribes, looking down on them for being uncivilized cultures and seeing them as lazy troublemakers. As a result, Klamath was one of the only major towns in the area and resulted in kind of them being bigoted towards the tribes that and other people that came into the surrounding area. Around the turn of the 23rd century, new communities continued to emerge, including the village of Arroyo, settled by the Vault Dweller following the defeat of the Unity. Tribal territories also extended to the very boundaries of the land and sea, such as unspecific coastal tribe that Solek hailed from Fallout 2. In the canceled Fallout Extreme game, Mount Hood and Fort Willamette were also real-world locations that were supposed to appear in this game. Other than that, the people from the village of Arroyo and Klamath, which also includes the Chosen One and Solek and Vic and other notable characters from the Fallout 2 game, are from Oregon. Dr. Morrison Grant, who was a pre-war professor of anthropological archaeology at the Banfield College in Oregon, who of course was abducted by Zetans in the Fallout 3 DLC, is also from Oregon, or at least he worked at a college in Oregon. The most interesting thing is Oregon actually only has one vault in the state by Salem, which is just a random location to have a vault in. But yeah, that's it's a lot of interesting, and I love like the early Fallouts, so it had a lot of fun things going on about it. Pennsylvania. Once a part of the Eastern Commonwealth, we know for a fact that Pennsylvania was hit by a nuclear strike on the day of the Great War via the news broadcast in Fallout 4. Specifically, the capital, Philadelphia, was hit as well. We know the most about one city in particular about the state, and that is Pittsburgh, aka what is later called the Pit, in the Fallout 3 DLC, and later in the Fallout 76 expedition it is featured. Before diving into the Pit, there are a few different people that are from the state, including Yasmin Childbury, Camp Ally from Fallout 76, who was born in Philadelphia, and Aubrey Willem, a settler doctor in Fallout 76. It is noted that many of the people who settled in the Foundation in Fallout 76 traveled from different areas, and one of that being from Pennsylvania. And of course, with that, most of the main characters from the Pit DLC and the expedition in the Pit are most likely from Pennsylvania as well. So there's a decent amount of notable people that are from Pennsylvania. Of course, the PA Steel Company, who owned the Pit Union Steel, was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the Holland Chase Concrete Company was also based in the same city. Both can, of course, be found in the Fallout 3 DLC. Again, before jumping into Pittsburgh, we also know that the state had 3 vaults, one close to Pittsburgh, one north of Harrisburg, and the other one close to Trenton. Rumor has it that the Liberty Bell also actually survived the bombings and is found still in Philly, which has been labeled as a dump, most likely due to how bad the state is, and in particular the city. And of course, Raven Rock, the military operations where the Enclave was based out of in Fallout 3, is set in the mountains of Pennsylvania. Now, let's go to Pittsburgh. So for the Pit, it is a Raider-dominated city built in the ruins of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, established in the aftermath of the Great War by local gangs trying to take over the chaos. Around 2255, inhabitants were nearly wiped out by an expeditionary force of the Brotherhood of Steel, only to be revitalized by Marshall Asher, a fallen Brotherhood member, who gathered an army of raiders under his command and set his sights on bringing the Pit back to its former glory and industrial strength. By 2277, the city's major contribution to the slave trade and access to functioning steel mills have made it a major power on the East Coast. Of course, I can go way more into detail about the city, but I'm sure you've heard it all 1,000 times before. You've played the DLCs. And this video is mainly about an overview of each of the states and not going to every nit and cranny kind of detail. So yeah, that's a brief overview about Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania as total. South Carolina. Based in the Southeast Commonwealth, we don't have much information about what happened to South Carolina after the bombs dropped, or really anything notable within the Fallout universe. What we do know is that there is indeed one vault within the state, located around Columbia. And besides that, the only other thing we know is that the MREs, or at least the ones that are found in Fallout New Vegas, are manufactured in Mullins, South Carolina, and that's basically it. That's the only thing we know about South Carolina. South Dakota. Based in the Northern Commonwealth, there is only one piece of information that mentions the state of South Dakota within the entire Fallout universe, and that comes from a piece of dialogue from Robert McCready in Fallout 4, in which he will state the following while clearing the warehouses in Good Neighbor. Some strange things turn up in these places. Ever hear about the warehouse in South Dakota? Yeesh. So let's break this down. So obviously it is a very small reference to the only mention of the state, actually. And it is a mention of a small warehouse that has something really strange happen to it. So now it can be assumed that McCready didn't necessarily go to South Dakota there by himself, because we know for the most part his timeline of what he did, and I don't think it makes sense that he traveled all the way to South Dakota to come back all the way to the East Coast. So it's presumed that it's just rumors, that he heard rumors. So my guess that it was some sort of experiment gone wrong, either from Vault-Tec or pre-war scientists or a mutated creature or something like that, that it has to be something bad or something very dramatic from a rumor that they are hearing this all the way out on the East Coast, all about this supposed warehouse that had something in South Dakota. But yeah, that's the only mention we have about South Dakota. Tennessee. Based in the East Central Commonwealth, only 2 mentions of the state are featured within the franchise, and one very minor one within the Fallout 4, and more interestingly, one from Fallout 76. In Fallout 4, on a holotape found on an apartment rooftop a little west of the Pickman Gallery, a woman by the name of Gemma will mention that a bunch of new mugs found on the corner store are from Tennessee. However, the far more interesting one can be found in the Observations volume number 27 in Fallout 76, which is a paper note introduced in the Night of the Moth update, and this note is one of 6 tomes belonging to the group known as the Enlightened, which we can find out about the Mothman. According to this note, it has been seen in Tennessee. The Mothman has been seen in Tennessee on a mountain trail, which makes it more interesting because it's one of the few surrounding states of West Virginia that will feature the Mothman, and thus we know that it's not just in one state. We know that the Mothman isn't just within West Virginia. It's just not a cryptid just within the state. So it travels within a few other notable states within the area. So interestingly, supposedly the Mothman is within Tennessee as well. Texas. Based in, of course, the Texas Commonwealth, for being such a major state, we actually don't know a lot about the state. Based on the map from the first season, we know that the state has the second most vaults with a whopping 10 vaults, which is, of course, right behind California with 11. We know very little about this state, although the non-canon game known as the infamous Fallout Brotherhood of Steel is set within the state. It is really not canon, and so many people hate on it that I'm not going to even really talk about it that much. However, what we do know that is canon is the following. The weapons manufacturer Red Raptor Firearms, who we first see in Fallout 76, is based out of Austin, Texas. They made the Medical Malpractice, which is a non-automatic pistol. That was first seen in Fallout 76, and it's really nothing to go home about. I mean, it's a cool pistol, but that's kind of it. We also know that the famous Desert Rangers, aka the group behind the Armor, that's a flagship for Fallout New Vegas, that is now part of the NCR, originally came from the Texas Rangers, who were obviously from Texas. This was, of course, said by Taicho in Fallout 2. The famous Vicky and Vance duo that were killed in a police shootout in Plano, Texas. And finally, perhaps the biggest finger in the face to Texas in Fallout is that the Boston baseball team beat the Texas-based team in a 3-0 series of games, which can be assumed to be the World Series. But yeah, honestly, I don't know why they haven't done anything in Texas, as it seems to be, it makes the most sense out of all the states. But hey, maybe for Fallout 5, it might be here. That's where my money would be, if not California again or something like that, if we're going back to like the roots of the series. Now, to talk about the elephant in the room, Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, obviously this is a non-canon game, as I already mentioned. It is set within the state, and the Texas expedition of the Brotherhood of Steel is a rogue chapter led by head paladin Rhombus. Now, I'm not going to go, again, too much in depth about the locations that are present in the game, but, Fort Worth and the Alamo are also, locations within this setting. So there is mentions of Texas within the Fallout universe. It's kind of shunned, and it's like heavily non-canon, and no one likes the Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. So that's my reasoning on Texas. Utah. Utah is another state within the Four Corners Commonwealth and is the primary setting of the Fallout New Vegas DLC Honest Hearts, mainly in Zion Canyon. We knew a decent about the state in the earlier years from Randall Clark in the DLC, in which we know that for some reason, several cities were targeted in this state during the Great War. And then, Salt Lake City received no less than 13 direct strikes, leaving the city mostly craters and rubbles, and with just the bare remains of high-rises, aka skyscrapers. The area is also not kind to the remaining humans, as it's been called the most dangerous territory conquered by the Legion, with raider tribes dominating the area, including the White Legs, the 80s, and the Sorrows. However, one of the few communities that would remain as a relatively decent haven for travelers was New Canaan. The New Canaanites originated as Mormons who built their settlements in the ruins of Ogden, Utah. Despite their proximity to various raider tribes such as the White Legs, the New Canaanites consistently managed to push away their attacks, establishing themselves as a relatively large, developed, and a safe city within the region. Also of a note, Volpes Inculta is originally from a tribe that is located in the southern region of Utah. As for vaults, there is indeed one vault, and that is based out of Salt Lake City, which are presumed to be Vault 70 based on the location. Again, watch my other video if you want to learn more about it, which is very interesting because, Salt Lake City was just bombed the crap out of. And again, the lore of Utah is just so weird. Like, I just don't understand why China hated Utah so much that they had to bomb Salt Lake City 13 directly times. Like, that's crazy. Unless Randall Clark was like exaggerating a little, but like that's crazy. Virginia. Originally part of the Columbia Commonwealth, Virginia has been shown in Fallout 3 and Fallout 76, which are, of course, decades apart and two distinct different regions of the state, so we know a decent amount about it. First, in Fallout 3, the following areas are within the state. It is Big Town, Vault 101, Megaton, Vault 87, Little Lamplight, the Dunwich Building, and Andale. And then, of course, we have Fallout 76, Virginia, which is basically the Shenandoah National Park area and the Skyline Valley region of the state. Due to what is shown in Fallout 3 compared to Fallout 76, it is assumed that the closer the region is to DC, or a bigger city, the more ruined the area was, aka the more rural Virginia. It is the least impact of the bombs they have. That's why we see such a stark difference between Fallout 3's map of Virginia and Fallout 76 version. As for people, 3 Fallout 76 characters you may not have known are from Virginia, including Joe Cray, Lacey Drummond, and Licia Mejia. And if you don't know who any of these characters are, without looking up, I will give you a cookie. Like, legit, if you can name a single one of these characters without looking it up, kudos to you, because looking at this list, I have no idea who any of these people are. And then finally, there are 5 vaults located within the state, one of which is unaccounted for currently. So we have the ones showed up in Fallout 76 and the ones shown up in Fallout 3. So with that, we are missing one. So somewhere in between these 2 regions in Virginia, there is one more vault just hanging out. Washington. Based in the Northwest Commonwealth, Washington is another state we don't have much information on, but at one point in time, this state was going to be featured within 2 different canceled Fallout games, most notably Project V13 and Fallout Extreme, which would both show a more snowy ruins of the state, most notably Seattle. The only real mention we have of the state is from Fallout 76, in which we see that junk mail business organizations called Rockwell Clearinghouse was based out of Wawa, Washington, who basically just sent mail out to random residents claiming that they were eligible for a cash prize of $100 million. Other than that, based on that scene from the Fallout TV show, we know that Washington has 3 to 4 vaults within the state, and although it is not canon, Vault 6 was supposed to be within the state in Fallout Extreme. Again, for all information about other vaults and the lore of that stuff, check out my other video. West Virginia. West Virginia is, of course, the main setting for Fallout 76 and would be the most well-known state as to what happened pre-war, during the bombings, and then pretty much directly after the bombs fell. We get an overview of pretty much the entire state as well. So without a doubt, we know most about this state. However, because the game takes place so far early on in the timeline of the series, we don't really know what the current state of the area is. So there's 2 possible answers to this, and one of them is of the fact that current settlements like the Foundation and the Crater don't grow much bigger than what they currently are, or they just disband later on in the timeline, and thus that is why they are not talked about anywhere else. You would think lore-wise, because, having a large gathering of people being successful, similar to settlements out west, you would think that these settlements would become known trading hubs and bigger cities, right? However, we don't hear anything, especially in Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, or even any of the DLCs. We don't get any mention of West Virginia or these settlements. So it's either that A, they just don't grow and they don't become anything, or B, it shows how isolated Boston and DC really are and how messed up they are that they have no knowledge of these settlements that are, just out there in West Virginia, and they're just not spoken about. Of course, you can always use the example of Bethesda not knowing they were going to have a game set in West Virginia that is earlier in the timeline, and that credit I do understand and I can forgive that. I mean, to be fair, Atlantic City is also not talked about in the later games, and it would most likely rival that of New Vegas in the East. So it is possible that we can just run into the issue of the universe. It didn't exist in universe yet, so it just overlooked and whatnot. However, let's look into one more detail, right? So look at the pit, right? So in Fallout 76 and then Fallout 3, we see a decline and a collapse of the settlement and area known as the pit. Although it wasn't that great to begin with, we do know it gets much worse by the time of the Fallout 3 events. So that could be an in-lore way as to why nothing happens with them. Again, you would think because they are shown so early on in the game that they would become more advanced, similar to that of locations in Fallout 1 and 2, but again, nothing really happens to that. As for going over the lore of the state, in case you never played the game, here's a brief rundown of the state once a part of the Eastern Commonwealth, and actually according to the vault map, there are 6 vaults in the state, to which we have only seen 5 in the game location currently, so there is room to grow still. Spared from most of the destruction and carnage of the Great War due to the relative isolation and lack of strategic targets, much of the surviving human population nonetheless perished over the following years due to the Scorched Plague. This saw the destruction of many of the pre-Wastelanders update factions, the Free States, the Responders, the Brotherhood of Steel, and so on. So this explains the lore and reason as to why there is no human NPCs in the early years of the game. However, in 2102, the Vault Dwellers emerged from the Appalachia 25 years after the isolation inside the Vault 76, which is, of course, where every player is from. And that began the reclaim of the wilderness. And by 2103, survivors from surrounding regions arrived in Appalachia and began to resettle it. This is where we see the Foundation, the Crater, the New Responders, the Brotherhood of Steel, like all these other factions coming back in, aka people coming back into the area because they see that it makes sense to settle in the area. I really like this in-lore reason as to Bethesda fixing over their mistake of not having NPCs in the early versions of the game. So this makes sense to me, and I get it. Again, the biggest thing is what happens to the same area afterwards, later on in the timeline, and that we just don't really know. Wyoming. Based in the northeastern Commonwealth, Wyoming surprisingly gets a mention within the Fallout universe, although it's not by much. The only mention and knowledge we have of it is within the series that two different groups of people possibly going there after a decision by the Courier 6 in Fallout New Vegas. If the Courier convinces Papa Khan to not help the Legion in the second battle of the Hoover Dam, the Khans will leave the area of New Vegas, heading towards the plains of Wyoming, where they will seek their own future. The other mention we get comes from the Honest Hearts DLC, where it is said the White Legs will flee to if they are defeated by Joshua Graham and the Dead Horses. It is then said that half the tribe of the White Legs will die within the first winter, and the remnants scatter the following spring. So with that, we know one of two things. There isn't really a large force within the region of Wyoming, and the winters are tough, as seen by the death of almost an entire tribe. So canonically, it is most likely the remnants of the White Legs are in the state. Whether or not they are actually active by the latest part in the timeline, aka in the Fallout TV show, that is up for debate. But it is most likely the White Legs are within this state, although very, very defeated and kind of broken down. Almost. However, the canon state of the Khans, this one's a bit trickier, as it's most likely the canon ending of New Vegas isn't with the Legion. It can be assumed that the Khans didn't fight alongside them and were just left to go into Wyoming, so it's very possible that they just went to Wyoming. However, on the flip side of that, it's almost equally as likely that they were basically mostly killed in the Battle of the Hoover Dam. So this is something we'll really see most likely in the Season 2 of the Fallout TV show, whether or not the canon ending of New Vegas, because that's something they will have to pretty much address. So if there is mention of the Khans, they might just be going to, they might just be in Wyoming, and they might still be traveling. If they are active in there, that means they are in Wyoming, most likely. If they are not active, it's most likely they're all dead out because the Legion battle, but that is what we know about this. So speaking of the show, also, we know that at least one vault is supposedly within the state, although we don't necessarily know which vault it is. Now, finally, there are 9 other states that have no mention or indication of what is going on in the states. The only thing we know, of course, is what Commonwealth they were part of, and that's only because it's just maps and references from the Fallout Bible, and if they have vaults in their states. However, these states, because there's nothing else, they are in the lower ends. Like, compared to all the other states, these are the ones with like 1 or 2, which is kind of crazy. And these are the following states that we have no other reference to, and that is Alabama with 1 vault, Arkansas with 1 vault, Delaware with 0 vaults, Indiana with 0 vaults, Michigan with 1 vault, North Dakota with 1 vault, Rhode Island with 1 vault, and Vermont with 1 vault, and then finally Wisconsin with 2 vaults, interestingly enough. And again, this is because we know nothing about these states. Originally, I was going to go through each of them and give like a theory and speculation and a piece of an idea of what I thought could be in this state, and maybe some like interesting tidbits and, you know, connections to what real world lore and like what it is. But then I realized I didn't really want to do that. It's like a lot of work to do, and a lot of people might not like that. So if this interests you into ideas of what these other states could have lore-wise, let me know, and I'll happily make a video of what other things like could be in it, because that could be really fun to do, but I didn't want to put in all of this effort if no one else was really interested in this. I also wanted to save my ideas because I am going to be running a Fallout 2D20 group fairly soon, and this is a game that's basically a TTRPG set in the Fallout universe. It's a 2D20 game, so you roll 2D20s instead of a regular game. I have a stacked cast with a bunch of friends that are all Fallout creators, and I'll think you'll love them. It's going to be a super fun and comedic group, to say the least. They're super fun. We're going to be set in Boston a couple of years before the Fallout 4. So go check that out and get ready, subscribe if you're interested in any of that. It'll be up later this year, probably within the next month and a half or so. And it's going to be a really good group, so hopefully just stick tuned and look out for that. Now, if you haven't already seen, I made a video previously going over all the vaults and their locations. So between this video, which has going into all the depths of all the states, and that video that said all the vault locations, especially from the map we know from the first season of the Fallout TV show, we can pretty accurately guess where a good Fallout 5 location would be. And based off the vaults and this lore we have for the states, I can't wait to share my thoughts about this, because I have a lot of thoughts, and I can pretty much say with pretty good backing of a couple of good states where I think it would make most sense for Fallout to be placed in. Keeping in mind, it's where they the best places according to all the lore and information we currently have. However, they could just dump and create something completely new or go back to a returning location. So again, this is based off the idea that if we use all the information we have right now, where would the best location be? So keep an eye out for that. That's a topic and discussion for another day, so subscribe if you haven't already. But other than that, thank you so much for watching this long video. I've been wanting to do this topic for so long, and finally I had the time to complete this video. If you like Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, and similar games, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any of my content. If you have any other topics or games or Fallout-related things you want me to cover, please let me know. Also, let me know where you want Fallout 5 to be set. What state do you think would be the best for it to be set, based off all this information from the lore that we have. But until then, this has been Nick from Nickstalgic, signing off.